The great arms race of nature began long before the first vertebrate life crawled from the water onto the land. That very exodus, in fact, was partly an escape, a desperate flight from the relentless, closing jaws of the deep. By the dawn of the age of dinosaurs, the evolutionary battle lines were starkly drawn. Some bloodlines continued to hone their weapons, teeth that could shear through bone, claws that could disembowel. Others chose a different path. They became fortresses. And of all these walking citadels, one stands as the archetype of impenetrable defense. Its formal introduction to science came in 1908 by the hand of the legendary American fossil hunter Barnum Brown. He had found Ankylosaurus. This creature was a ghost from the very end of an era, one of the last non-avian dinosaurs to walk the Earth. It lived in the final moments of the Cretaceous period, a heavyweight roaming the western edge of the North American continent. To this day, it is the only known species in its genus, though its wider family contains at least 19 distinct genera. And yet, what is most astonishing is that we have never found a complete skeleton, not one. Its true form is a grand puzzle, an image painstakingly reconstructed from scattered, disparate samples and the anatomical blueprints of its closest relatives. From these fragments, a titan emerges. A body stretching from 6 to 10 meters with a mass approaching 8 tons. Its head, known to us from 3 well-preserved skulls, tells a story of absolute security. Each skull is subtly different, perhaps the telltale signs of individual variation, or the lost secrets of how these animals changed as they grew. The skull itself was a broad, flattened triangle, ending in a powerful beak. Its eyes, not set stomaching pyramidal horns, below, a second pair of horns swept backwards and down, guarding its vulnerable throat. Scientists now believe this entire cranial helmet was a complex fusion of bone and osteoderms, ossified plates of skin, a living mosaic that grew more intricate with every passing. This was not merely an animal. It was a geological event in motion, a testament to the evolutionary imperative to survive. Yet, for all its armor, for all its might, it could not defend against a world changing forever. A final, silent testament that even the most perfect fortress is ultimately subject to the inexorable march of time. In the twilight of the Cretaceous, the landscape was dominated by giants. But among them walked a living fortress, a creature so perfectly engineered for defense, it was almost a geological event in itself. This was Ankylosaurus. The story of its life was written in its very bones, beginning with its skull. In the young, the bony plates of its head armor were distinct, with clear gaps between them. But as the animal matured, these plates would fuse, growing together to form a near monolithic shield. The individual bony scutes, or osteoderms, might have varied in their specific shape and size from one Ankylosaurus to another, unmistakable uniform for the species. Its posture was low and deliberate. It moved upon 4 powerful limbs, its hind legs noticeably longer than its forelegs, giving its back a distinct, arching profile. It's provided by 3 massive toes. The evidence for the sheer power of this animal is etched into the fossils themselves. On the neck vertebrae of adult specimens, we find remarkably well-developed entheses, the precise points where tendons once anchored immense muscles to the bone. This is the unmistakable signature of a tremendously powerful neck, a biological crane designed for one purpose: to support the colossal weight of its armored head. Yet, this strength came at the cost of agility. The dorsal vertebrae along its back were short and packed tightly together, indicating a spine of incredible rigidity.
There was little room for movement here, especially in the vertical plane. This was not a creature that could rear up or flex its back. It was a walking battering ram, a solid, unified mass of bone and muscle.
But this rigidity ended dramatically at the base of its tail.
Here, the skeleton was engineered for astonishing flexibility, allowing the tail to be whipped from side to side in a wide, lethal arc. This was the engine for one of the most formidable weapons in the history of life on Earth, a great, bony club. It was an evolutionary masterstroke that set the Ankylosaurids apart. Their closest relatives, the Nodosaurids, were also heavily armored, but they were defenseless in this regard. They had only their passive shield. Ankylosaurus could fight back.
Frustratingly, a complete, articulated set of its body armor has never been found. Our vision of its back and flanks is a reconstruction, a careful mosaic assembled from the remains of its closest kin. We know the individual osteoderms ranged in length from a mere 1 centimeter to over 35.5 centimeters. They were relatively thin, with a convex shape on the diminishing towards the pelvic region. Along its sides, the osteoderms took on a more squared-off shape, forming a solid wall. Its vulnerable neck was girded by 2 half-rings of immense, fused plates, a permanent, bony gorget.
The only known tail club is a truly awesome artifact. It measures 60 centimeters long, 49 centimeters wide, and 19 centimeters high. Though these dimensions would have surely varied with the age, sex, and individual nature of the animal. This grim weapon was semicircular, composed of 2 enormous osteoderms fused to the final vertebrae, one on each side of the tail. We see similar structurally narrower. These animals, all close cousins living across what is now the United States and Canada some 75 to 76 million years ago, represent variations on a theme of ultimate defense.
Growing up to 6 meters long, Ankylosaurus was an evolutionary masterpiece, a creature that sacrificed speed for impregnability. It was a slow, inexorable force of nature, a testament to a world where the constant extremes. Today, all that remains is the silent stone, a quiet record of a living castle that once walked the Earth.
The Earth in its late Cretaceous period was a realm of titans, and among them moved a living fortress. A creature so heavily armored it was a dynasty unto itself. They could reach formidable lengths and weigh up to 2 tons. One of the largest skulls ever unearthed measures a staggering 478 millimeters wide by 411 millimeters long, the very architecture of a defensive masterpiece.
Of the roughly 40 individual animals known to science, most have been recovered from the rich fossil beds of Alberta, Canada, and the American state of Montana. But one specimen, found in the Canadian Badlands, is truly without equal. It is, by far, the best preserved ankylosaur ever discovered, and the reason for its fame lies not in its skeleton, but in something far more delicate, far more revealing. Its skin. Miraculously, the creature's tough, patterned hide remained almost entirely intact, a ghost in the stone. It was through this breathtaking window into the past that scientists could finally map the true placement of its osteoderms, the bony plates that made up its formidable shield.
But where did such an elaborate creature come from? To find the answer, we must rewind the geological clock. The precise time and place of the very first ankylosaur remains a tantalizing mystery. We know that sometime during the middle of the Jurassic period, the evolutionary path of the armored dinosaurs forked. One branch led to the stegosaurs, with their iconic plates and spiked tails. The other led to the ankylosaurs. Later, this lineage would split again,
into the club-tailed Ankylosaurids and their cousins, the Nodosaurids. By all accounts, the Ankylosaurids were the more evolutionarily advanced, the pinnacle of this defensive design.
For decades, the title of the earliest known ankylosaur belonged to a creature named Minmi. Discovered in 1964 in Australia, it roamed that continent approximately 119 million years ago. Minmi was a puzzle. In many ways, this small dinosaur, weighing only around 300 kilograms and stretching no more than 3 meters, appeared to be a transitional form, a link between the two great families of armored dinosaurs. So much so that paleontologists have long debated its proper classification. It received its name from Minmi Crossing, the very spot where its remains were found.
But we must remember, by the early Cretaceous, Australia was already an island continent, isolated from the rest of the world. Eked their signature tail club, and its armor held surprises. Bony plates protected its underbelly, and a series of elongated spikes ran along its hips, a feature thought to be a defense against attacks from the rear.
Numerous fossils from the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous have been found. But then, in 2021, a discovery in Morocco completely rewrote the first chapter of their story. There, locked in rock 168 million years old, was the earliest ankylosaur ever found. It was named Spicomelus, a Latin name that translates to collar of spike.
The find was revolutionary, pushing the origins of this group tens of millions of years deeper into the past than Minmi ever could. The title of earliest armored dinosaur is still contested. A slightly older fossil from Scotland, perhaps a few million years more ancient, vies for the crown. But that creature is so enigmatic, it doesn't even have a name yet. Its identity still a matter of intense scientific debate. And so, the search continues. Each new fossil, whether a near-perfect specimen with skin intact or a few enigmatic bones from the dawn of their time, adds another piece to the grand puzzle. They remind us that the history of life is not a finished book, but a story that is still being unearthed, one magnificent discovery at a time. The grand story of the armored dinosaurs has long been a tale told in the north. On the supercontinent of Laurasia, a vast tapestry of life unfolded, giving rise to the familiar giants that would one day become the continents of North America and Eurasia. Here, the stegosaurs and their heavily plated cousins, the ankylosaurs, thrived. But the southern lands, the great mass of Gondwana, remained an enigma, a ghost continent in the paleontological record. For decades, the only whisper of an armored dinosaur from this lost world was Adratoclite, a primitive stegosaur from the Jurassic. It was a lonely outlier in a world seemingly devoid of its kind.
Until Spicomelus was unearthed. Found in the arid landscapes of modern-day Morocco, this creature was not merely another fossil. It was a challenge to everything we thought we knew. On one hand, its features marked it as a basal, or primitive, ankylosaur, an early ancestor on a long and successful lineage. But on the other, it possessed a biological feature so bizarre, it remains unique among all known vertebrates. In every other armored animal, from the crocodile to the armadillo, the bony plates, the osteoderms, are embedded within the skin and soft tissue. They form a flexible yet formidable shield. Spicomelus defied this fundamental rule of anatomy. Its armor was not set in its skin. It grew directly from its bones. The fossilized ribs are fused seamlessly with long, sharp spikes, creating a permanent, rigid cage of bone and armor. It is a biological architecture seen nowhere else in the vertebrate kingdom, not before and not since. Based on the fragmented remains, Scientists can only speculate on its full size, but current estimates suggest a creature of more than...
And it was not alone in its time.
The world of 165 million years ago was populated by other evolutionary experiments in defense. In the swamplands that would one day become England, a relative named Sarcolestes roamed. Its jaw was similar to that of the nodosaurids, yet its teeth and a peculiar armored plate fused directly to its jawbone were distinct, the devastating tail club that would define its later descendants.
Far to the east, in what is now China, another contemporary emerged. A true ankylosaur named Ankylosaurus, the lizard from the celestial pond. This creature carries a curious modern footnote. Its original proposed name was Jurassisaurus. The name was given in honor of the film Jurassic Park, as its famous director Steven Spielberg had personally funded the Chinese paleontological research. There was even a fleeting proposal to create the species name from a combination of the surnames of the film's lead actors. In the end, scientific convention prevailed.
But the full picture of this celestial pond lizard remains elusive.
All we have are around 20 vertebrae, fragments of limbs, and scattered bony plates. Yet from these scattered clues, a pattern begins to emerge. Around 110 million years ago, the evolutionary paths of North American and Asian ankylosaurs began to converge. The small, often strange early forms gave way to larger, more powerful varieties. They were becoming the classic armored tanks of the Cretaceous, low-slung, covered in impenetrable plating, and armed with a weapon of brutal efficiency, the tail club. Biomechanical modeling of this structure reveals its terrifying potential. The tail could swing through an arc of nearly 100 degrees with incredible force. A well-aimed blow was more than enough to shatter the leg of a large predatory theropod. It was a shield and a mace, a defensive strategy perfected over millions of years, an evolutionary arms race written in bone. Each fossil is not an ending, but a single frozen frame in the impossibly long film of life. They are testaments to nature's boundless and sometimes baffling creativity. Reminders that for every rule we think we understand, there is an exception buried somewhere in the deep, silent stone, waiting to tell its story. Over millennia, the ankylosaur's tail evolved into something more than a mere appendage. It became a biological sledgehammer. The bony club at its tip grew not only larger, but significantly stronger, a testament to the brutal pressures of the late Cretaceous. Yet, a debate still echoes through the halls of paleontology. Was this devastating weapon swung in desperate defense against the great tyrannosaurs? Or was it reserved for vicious internal disputes over territory and mates?
In the ancient landscapes of Asia, we find clues. Consider Bisectopelta, the first of its kind unearthed in the stark deserts of Uzbekistan. Described in the year 2004, this creature, living between 65 and 82 million years ago, was a true behemoth. An estimated 7 meters in length, it carried 4 tons of armor and bone. Modern analysis of its skull reveals a world perceived through highly advanced senses. This was no dull, lumbering beast. It possessed an exceptional sense of smell and hearing sharp enough to detect a predator's approach from a great distance. Scientists even discovered a unique internal mechanism for cooling its brain, a vital adaptation for a giant living in a harsh climate.
Further east, in what is now Mongolia and China, roamed the Pinnacosaurus. Though smaller, reaching 5 meters and weighing up to 2 tons, it was no less formidable. Fossils dated between 75 and 80 million years old show an animal built for defense. Its 30-centimeter skull was a helmet of fused bone, and its back was a mosaic of protective oval plates. But perhaps the most breathtaking glimpse into this armored world
comes not from an ankylosaurid, but its cousin, a nodosaur from North America. Borealopelta. Discovered in the oil sands of Alberta, Canada, this specimen is a miracle of preservation. After its death, the animal's body was swept out to sea, sinking to the oxygen-starved floor of an ancient waterway. There it was fossilized not as a collection of bones, but as a three-dimensional statue, complete with its armor and even remnants of its skin. Described in 2017, it revealed long, dramatic spikes on its shoulders. But more importantly, it revealed its color. For the first time, we could see an armored dinosaur as it truly was, a creature of deep, reddish-brown, camouflaged against the soil and foliage of its world.
Across continents and through millions of years, the story of these living fortresses is one of escalation. They grew larger, their armor more complex, their defenses more absolute. We have unearthed dozens of genera, each a unique solution to the problem of survival. And with every new discovery, every fragment of bone pulled from the earth, we are reminded that evolution is not a simple line, but a vast, intricate epic, whose most astonishing chapters are still waiting to be read.